This is David Bateson, the voice of Agent 47, and you're listening to the Xbox Expansion Pass.
Welcome one, welcome all to episode 90 of the Xbox Expansion Pass, recorded on Sunday, July 11th, 2021. I am your host, Luke Lohr of the InsipidGhost. In this episode, I'm joined by Jeff Cannata, host of both the Dungeon Run and DLC, to discuss the latest gaming news with Xbox marketing its all-for-one video, Deathloop's PlayStation State of Play Spotlight, and just where gaming is headed in the years to come. At the end of the show, I've got a review of the Arctis Prime, which is the latest gaming headset from SteelSeries. Enjoy. Yet another week of gaming is upon us and behind us. Welcome to XEP, discussing all things in the Gamerverse as they pertain to the Xbox ecosystem. And as I am wont to do each and every week, I like to start the show by offering words of kindness to those who have made my gaming week better. And this week, the words of kindness go to our guest host, Mr. Jeff Cannata, host of both the Dungeon Room and DLC, steward of the Geeks and Sneaks, and a man of all too many talents, fresh off a plane. Jeff Cannata, thank you for being here.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's actually the Dungeon Run, not the Dungeon Room, but I just wanted
Did I say room? Oh, no.
No problem.
Oh,
it's
no,
no problem.
It says run in my notes. How could I say room? Goodness gracious.
No worries.
Good. Well, how are you, man? Things are good?
Yes, things are good. Things are chaotic in my world as usual, but things are good. How are you?
I am fantastic. It's a pleasure to have you on. I've been listening to DLC for years at this point, introduced to me by the Megadads some years ago, and Jeff,
Awesome.
Adam Leonard and John Wall kind of introduced me. So that's kind of it's a pleasure to have you on.
You've been on our show as a guest, so I was grateful for that, and thanks for listening. I appreciate it. We've been going a long time. I think we're in our 8th year now, so it's a little nuts.
Yeah, that is cool. We've had two longtime podcasters on in recent episodes. Chris Johnston from Player One and Danny Pena from Gamertag Radio. They've been podcasting for, goodness gracious, so long. What's it like to have such a long-standing date, as it were, with the podcasting community?
Yeah, I mean, we doing DLC for 8 years, which was the spiritual successor of Weekend Confirmed, which we did for 4 years, 4 years. And that was after I'd done the Totally Rad show for several years. So yeah, I've been going since 2006, which feels like an eternity in internet years. But yeah, it's a privilege. It's a privilege to be able to be doing this and make my living doing it. It's pretty cool. People ask, like, how do you get into podcasting? And my answer is always, get a time machine, go back to 2006 and start there. Cause I have no idea how you start now. It's very crowded and the Wild West out in the podcasting world now, but I'm glad that I was there at the sort of the beginning of it all, or close to the beginning of it all.
Certainly, I would imagine you've seen a lot of ebbs and flows and changes in the gaming industry. Do you have any like standout moments or thoughts, like when you take moments of reflection on how far it's come since 2006 or so?
Oh man, yeah. I look at the gaming industry, interestingly, as sort of having been the span of my life. You know, as somebody that was born in the late 70s, I was born right around the time that Pong came out. You know, like the first video game, and so my lifetime has been video games, the lifetime of video games. And it's wild to see how far we've come, how mainstream they've become, how sophisticated they've become. It is a cultural force. It is an entertainment medium, an art form for sure. All of that stuff is really encouraging and cool to me. And I think we still have a really untapped potential in this hobby. And I think video games can become even more relevant to everyday people and everyday lives. I think interactive entertainment has the opportunity to allow us to learn and grow and experience things in a way that passive entertainment does not. You know, I think everybody has watched a movie that has changed their perspective on something. But I think interacting with a video game, interacting with a piece of media that allows you to that understands that you're making choices and reacts to your choices and allows you to live inside the systems of something has even more potential to affect the player, the viewer, the end user, um, than just sitting there and watching a story. Like having to make decisions, I think, is a very, very powerful thing. And I think we're really just at the beginning of seeing how powerful that can be.
I agree with you. We're certainly a young medium, compared to the music industry, the film industry, TV, that kind of thing. It certainly seems like our industry feels very young, and yet in the short amount of time, we've seen, Atari fade away. Nintendo brought games back to prominence. PlayStation entered a market. Sega left it in terms of hardware. We've seen the birth of online in our time. And something you're an avid fan of is VR, and that interactivity is enhanced all that much more there. It is wild to think how much we've seen in such a short amount of time.
Yeah. Yeah. And it seems to be happening quicker and quicker, right? All technology seems to be advancing at an exponential rate. And it's exciting. It's a little scary to see, I have young kids now, and to see how they engage with interactive media is a little scary, because not everybody has my kids' best interest at heart, that they're making these interactive experiences. They kind of want to squeeze money out of my kids or train them, leverage their little lizard brains in ways that I think might not be entirely healthy or appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that is fascinating. But yeah, I mean, I think interactive virtual worlds are going to be a bigger and bigger part of the human experience going forward. It's not going to shrink. It's only going to expand. And so I am optimistic about how that can impact the human experience. I think that is going to be an opportunity for empathy and understanding how other people exist, and a way to explore and spark our imaginations uh, in ways that we've never had the opportunity to do before. That's why I'm so excited about VR. I think it really is going to change the world. I'm bullish on VR for sure.
I'm inclined to agree with you, though I have not entered the VR gaming realm. I see a lot of potential for gaming, for interactive media, for storytelling, for purchasing, for finding content. It'll be really neat to see kind of where we go with that. But kind of one more thing on that reflection piece. Do you have any games in your gaming history that you feel like opened up new doors for your world in terms of gaming and what gaming could do? I often think about Metal Gear Solid. That changed
Mm,
gaming for me, and storytelling and
sure.
immersion. But any
Yeah.
standouts for you?
It's funny. I think the one that just leapt to my mind when you said that was the first BioShock,
Really?
with
Okay.
how it leveraged the concept of playing as part of the narrative itself. How it used the interact. I mean, I guess it's okay to spoil a game that's as old as BioShock, and I'm sure most people know about the central hook of that game that is revealed toward the end of the game. Leverages the concept of you doing what you're told, uh, which is sort of how interactive entertainment is crafted, right? I get a
Mm-hmm.
quest, it tells me what to do, I go do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that game went, oh, hey, have you ever thought about that? Have you thought about what that means to just do as you're told? And I thought that really was like, oh, this incredible moment in gaming where the story itself was only possible in an interactive media because it was commenting on your interactivity itself.
Mm-hmm.
It was a powerful and profound thing, and I don't think we've even begun to explore more of that. I think that was just sort of a toe in the water of what that could possibly, the relevance that could bring to gaming.
It's funny when I think about interactivity and the way I move through different worlds and whether or not I'm really choosing to go to certain objectives and whatnot. And I think back to a short documentary I watched on level design for The Last of Us 2. And in that, they have the character, I think you were playing as Abby at the time, climbing up a two flights of stairs. And they put a box in a certain spot on the stairs so that the player had to go around it And as a result of that, they would be looking at a very particular spot on screen when they rounded that box, so they could begin a new storytelling trope. And it was very subtle, and you would never think that a box could do
Right.
that.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, it brings up that same elements of BioShock, in that it's making you question whether or not you're choosing to do something, or you're compelled to do something, or they're really just toying with you,
Yeah.
as it were. That's neat.
I find that fascinating. I love that stuff. It is, as a dungeon master on the Dungeon Run, the live play Dungeons and Dragons show that I do. I think about that a lot. That idea of creating circumstances in which the players think they are making completely autonomous choices, but they're doing exactly what I want them to do. And that is a really fun challenge and a cool element of game design. It's very much the same thing you're talking about. The player thinks that they've decided to walk around that box and thinks that they've decided to point the camera where they're pointing it, but the game designer very, very intentionally created circumstances in which they were going to do that. And it happens without them knowing. Now, there's a nefarious side to that, right? There's a lot of that kind of thing with regard to what I was talking about earlier with the lizard brain and your sort of human tendencies to want to do certain things, loot boxes and all that stuff. When something explodes and pops open and it's shiny and sparkling and swirling around, oh, we want that. We are sort of programmed to be intrigued by that. And a lot of that game design theory can be leveraged to take advantage of our human brains that haven't had these kind of stimuli for most of our evolutionary existence. But I also think that there's, the fun side is that you get to create these cool moments where it feels like I did something, but the designer made the circumstances impossible for me not to do that.
I am recently fresh off finishing Metro Exodus. I'd started it when it first came out, kind of fell away about halfway through that game. It's really, really good, but it was long. And I just went back and wrapped it up. And that game is wide linear, meaning that it's not quite open world. It funnels you in some spots, but you have a lot of choice theoretically. And in playing through that, I started thinking about Halo Infinite and how they're going to be trying to tell this very particular story, that they're trying to redirect the Halo franchise, but they're doing it in a near open world setting. And I'm curious just how much I will be creating my own narrative versus doing exactly what those designers want. And then the other side of that, the lizard brain element, is looking at how some of these games, and we'll talk about Assassin's Creed Infinity in a bit, but how these games that are going to exist as persistent online or live service, not quite MMOs, with various levels of finances and transactions, how they're going to monetize different things, where they're going to push players to fund different projects. I have so many questions, and I'm curious, I'm excited, I'm nervous about stuff I love, like I'm very excited for Halo Infinite. Stuff that I'm a little more detached from, like Assassin's Creed Infinity, just curious. But it is interesting. And then, like you mentioned earlier, when you have kids and they're getting squeezed for money, that's really you getting squeezed for money, and that programming, as it were. It's a neat thing to consider.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's interesting to see it work, and it is me getting squeezed for money, but it's often unbeknownst to me, right? Because these apps are targeted toward young kids, and you often aren't aware at how much they are manipulating the brain of these undeveloped young kids who don't know what it means to click on this or push that. And so I think that's very problematic and really something that the industry has to reckon with, because I love video games and I want them to flourish, and I want them to be a positive thing in the world. And there's definitely an element of it that is very negative and very exploitive, and it tugs me in two different directions.
Certainly, I can understand that. And I'll transition to our first topic with that, in that one of the things that every company has to do is to bring players into their player base, motivate them to participate in their ecosystems, purchase things, be active users and whatnot. And because this is an Xbox show, I looked back at this past week of gaming news and then how it pertained to Xbox. And in this past week, Jeff, we saw a new Switch model be announced. We talked about a PlayStation State of Play and Deathloop. And then Xbox had an all-for-one commercial for Game Pass in which they brought this nostalgic 90s band all-for-one back to really have a music video about Game Pass. It was hilarious. It was a parody. And my timeline was equally filled with all three, not just a new Switch model or not just the state of play. And I thought it was really fascinating to look at how Microsoft managed to get into people's heads and activate player engagement by way of a fake music video. Not fake, I guess it's not true. It's not fake. It's just a parody video. That was a cool reimagining, but it really spoke to me in that, man, socials are powerful and motivating.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I agree. It's an interesting game that Microsoft is playing, and I'm there for it. I like Game Pass as this central killer app. Like Game Pass itself is the killer app. I think that is really smart and really cool, and kind of values the customer in a way that these other companies aren't. And I'm excited. I like that. Clearly, PlayStation 5 seems to be ahead. Well, I mean, I guess Switch would be the crushing sales, but as far as these new consoles, PlayStation 5 seems to be leading in sales. But I like how Microsoft is holding fast to their strategy and adding value to Game Pass all the time. I think it's really, really compelling, and it almost is silly for anyone not to be subscribed to Game Pass, right? It's so useful and provides so much value to the end user that I applaud them for continuing to just increase value and not increase price on that.
It's true. And I would imagine that price goes up in a few years. But I mean, a lot of people are stacking it. It feels like people are in for the long haul once they get in. I do not personally know a lot of people that dive into Game Pass for short term benefits, but Sony continues to produce killer apps with their AAA IP. I mean, from Last of Us 2, I think it was the most recent one. Returnal might be argued in there. Ratchet and Clank might be argued in there. All fantastic games, and Game Pass really is kind of its version of that. We haven't really seen their studios produce, but the way they go about marketing it, the Xbox fridge, the music videos and stuff, they seem very self-aware of their position in the market. And I think I'm there for it. I appreciate it and I enjoy it.
Yeah, and making the console itself part of the subscription if you bump up your subscription level a little bit, so there's no upfront costs for buying the hardware. I think all of that's really smart and allows people to get into this new generation of games hardware with no upfront costs. I think is a really powerful and compelling offer. I think it's something that it's going to open up gaming to a lot of folks that probably couldn't afford it beforehand.
Now, PlayStation Now is, I would argue, the competitor service to Game Pass. Do you subscribe to either of the two, or have a lot of experience in the two that you enjoy?
I'm certainly a Game Pass subscriber. I love it, and I think, like I said, I think it's almost it's like Amazon Prime level of like, there's no reason not to. I mean, if you can afford it, it's it pays for itself over and over. I am a PlayStation Plus subscriber. I'm not a PlayStation Now subscriber. And I hope that Sony recognizes that Game Pass is a direct competitor and starts really doing some day and date stuff with their big releases on PlayStation Now. I would happily pay that fee every month to have a comparable service. I just think it's more back catalog stuff, and I tend to be a guy who's excited about the next big thing. So it doesn't offer the same value that Game Pass does for me at this moment.
In my mind, PlayStation Now is a really good service that needs to break its stigma from when it launched, right? Because it launched on, I would argue, rocky cloud infrastructure. I mean, xCloud's kind of leading the charge. Stadia, technologically speaking, is probably a little bit behind that. But PlayStation Now had really good ideas of just streaming games to you. It just didn't work, I think, the way we were hoping it might, but they've since unlocked it to be available for download for PS4 games. There's some mixed messaging on whether or not you get PS4 or PS5 versions, and I would say that their marketing doesn't feel as motivated, whereas Game Pass does. But the service, I think, is very respectable, and PlayStation Plus, to your point, pointing out that subscription, they have that instant game collection on PS5, which is,
Yeah.
I mean, that pays for itself over and over again with games like God of War and Spider-Man stuff.
Great games, super great games. Yeah, yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head when it comes to messaging, because clearly Microsoft is putting Game Pass front and center in their messaging, and with the logo on, on every trailer and all that stuff, really reinforcing what they're trying to do with Game Pass. Whereas Sony doesn't really seem too interested in marketing PlayStation Now. It's about marketing these individual titles, and then PlayStation Now is also available. And I think that kind of is telling as to their strategy. But I hope, I jokingly predicted this year that PlayStation Plus and PlayStation Now would be combined into one service called PlayStation Plow, which I still hope happens. But I think it would be in their best interest to combine those services, kind of how Microsoft has done with Gold and Game Pass, and just kind of make it the same thing, and make it all one, purchasable monthly fee.
Sure. I think to the Microsoft side, they're due for some consolidation. I think a lot of people are unhappy with the current offerings of Gold, particularly when they tried to raise the price a few months back. But when you look at Game Pass Ultimate, I mean, it's unquestionably the best value. And the option of xCloud, I think, is going to get that much more enticing as COVID restrictions are lifted worldwide, which, hopefully happens safely and productively in the right ways. But as people travel more, xCloud will be accessed more. And as such, I think you'll see an increase in Game Pass subscribers, which we already, I believe the last number I heard was 25 million, but that may not be official now that I'm saying that out loud. But it all comes down to messaging and making sure that people understand the value to their dollar. And I would like to see Sony up their game with the PlayStation Now marketing, because that competition is why we have Game Pass. That competition is why we have these acquisition wars, as it were. And for anybody that's financially capable, if you can own more than one system, I mean, that is just the way to go. There's so much value out there. The only question now is, do we have the time for it?
Right. Yeah. That becomes the number one resource. The number one commodity is time, especially with all the, you're talking about games with the word infinite after them. It's like, guess what is not infinite? My time. So yeah, that's a challenge, especially as a guy with two kids. That's my number one problem.
Yeah. And one of the funny things is with Halo Infinite, they're talking about their battle pass, season pass system is not going to be expiring, whereas like Fortnite or Destiny, like you might miss a window to unlock certain content. These will always be accessible, which I appreciate, because when Infinite is in the title, Assassin's Creed forthcoming, and then of course Halo Infinite and anything else, I do worry when live service games become my job. I don't want that. I want to be able to log on and relax, not feel pressured to play two more games or sacrifice family time in order to get an unlock that I really want in a game. And so I'm hoping that's a trend that catches on as well. Are you an avid player of any live service game in particular?
I used to be very, very heavily into Heroes of the Storm. That was my MOBA of choice, and I played it obsessively and put many, 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 many hours into it. I always get back into World of Warcraft when a new expansion comes out. They just had a new update that pulls me back in. But the nature of my job and my life is that I constantly have to play new stuff, and I don't have tons of surplus time to pour into the game that I just want to play for my own enjoyment. So the short answer is no, not really anymore. There's not really one kind of live play service that I come back to over and over.
Well, then I wonder how you're feeling about the recent news of Assassin's Creed Infinity. The idea being, and this was confirmed after a leaked report, this was confirmed by Ubisoft, that they would be launching a new Assassin's Creed platform, Assassin's Creed Infinity, that will essentially be, and I'm trying to paraphrase as best and as easily understandable, and either a hub for all the Assassin's Creed games, or more likely one platform in which you can play new Assassin's Creed stories going forward. And before you answer, I'll say that I had very mixed feelings about this, because in many ways I felt like Odyssey and Origins, and then recently Valhalla, were so huge that they could have been parsed into a live service game, and I wouldn't have known the difference because they just had so much content. And they're bringing even more to Valhalla. Does this news of a previously single player third person adventure game going to a live service model, does that worry you? Does that bother you? Are you excited for that? Where do you stand on this?
I think this is going to be a major trend, right? We've seen it with Halo. I think this is the Fortnite-ification of the industry, where Fortnite is such a juggernaut and such a revenue generating thing, and even GTA 5, right, which is ostensibly a single player one time release game, but has become this incredibly perpetual money making machine because of its live service aspects. I think a lot of companies are seeing that as the a real way to continually monetize these games and not have to worry about cyclical releases. So I think we're going to see a lot more of it. Now, whether or not I like it, I think it's case by case, right? I think it's really cool to be into a game that updates all the time and is perpetual, and it doesn't feel like you need a numbered sequel every few years or yearly or whatever the case may be to dip back into that game world. And I think with Assassin's Creed, if you have this singular sort of futuristic place, and you get into an animus that sends you back into different timelines, I think that's kind of a cool concept. And they released the Greece one, and then they released the feudal Japan one, and then they released the Renaissance Italy one, and and it's all from the same general world, and you're upgrading your character and getting stronger, and then you have to go to these other new places. I mean, it becomes much more an MMO style game, which I like. So I think that could be cool.
I too, and Famous Seamus wrote in asking questions about Assassin's Creed Legacy, our thoughts on it, which we just answered, and then he also wants to know if we think that we're at a point of too many live service games. But I kind of dig what you're telling me about Assassin's Creed. The idea that you go into an animus, you access a world, and it's all there. And I feel like there's a comfortable way to, you go into the animus and then you're transported to Assassin's Creed Black Flag or to Origins, the previously created stuff, as well as new locations and locales. I'm curious if that's a subscription model. Like, do you just subscribe to Assassin's Creed Infinity and then that's what you play? Like, that's your thing?
Maybe. I mean, or maybe it's just a way to make the Ubisoft Connect service more sustainable, and you're not just waiting for the next big game you're not just waiting for Far Cry to come out or whatever to be paying your Ubisoft membership. It's this perpetual world inside the Ubisoft service that gets you access to that and whatever else they put out.
That's a good point. And then, comparing it to Halo Infinite, which is similarly single-ish player game going now into that open stance. It's hard to describe Halo Infinite like out of context, but I wonder if you might get multiplayer into Assassin's Creed Infinity in some ways. Like you and your friend go together into feudal Japan, or go together into ancient Greece, or wherever new locales they take you. I don't know, Aztec, Mexico, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Multiplayer would be a cool element of that.
Yes. I mean, that's not what, blows my skirt up, but I'm into that in a theoretical sense. I think that's cool. And I think anything that gets you motivated, like this one perpetual progression that goes across all the Assassin's Creed games, I think that's a really interesting idea. That's something that I could get behind. And I just think we're going to see a lot more of that, because these companies don't want to just charge you once every few years. They want to keep you on that spigot, and I think, to your point about, or to Famous Seamus's point about, you don't have to tell me, he's famous. I know him.
Yeah, exactly,
right? About too many live service games. I think for me that is true, but it is only true because I live in an old paradigm, which is I play video games, right? When I say I play video games, what I mean is I want to play everything. And that's just increasingly untenable and not even really what the industry is about. It'd be like saying I read books. It's like, well, what kind of books do you read? You know, you can't read all the books. But there
Right.
was a time, for a long time, when I could pretty much play all the video games. You know, I could be into all the video games. I mean, not really all of them, but I had a sense, and I had really played most of the stuff that had come out. But it's like, we're in a situation now where it's like, well, you know, if you read books, do you read cookbooks? Do you read, you know, auto repair manuals? Do you read mystery novels? What do you read? You know? And I think that's where video games are going too, where it is much more specialized, and a person that plays video games can just play Destiny, right? That's their game. They just play Destiny and maybe a couple of others, or whatever. And there's so much there, and it's become so mainstream that it's not about there being too many live service games. It's that they are specific to very specific markets, right? The people who are live servicing into a large scale simulation of World War II are not the same people who are enjoying the live service Forza game, right? It's just made for completely different audiences, and that's okay, right? It's not there's too many of them. It's that there's a bunch of games that just aren't made for you, perhaps. And that's a hard thing for me to swallow, because it's never been the case for me.
You're absolutely right. And my mind, for some reason, jumped to World of Tanks. And I can remember the E3 where Microsoft said World of Tanks is coming to Xbox. And I could tell that was a very big deal. And I had no clue why or how. And I was clued in by people in the know just how big that game is, how many millions of players play that game, and how much some of those premium tanks can go for. You know, like $100 version of a tank can there, and people just play World of Tanks, or they just play Sea of Thieves, or they just play any of these games that are persistently online. But they would not say I play video games. They would say I play World of Tanks, or I play Destiny. And you're right. Yeah, you're a very good point. Very good point.
Yeah. Thanks.
It's just funny to think about, because my least favorite question when people find out that I'm a gamer, and I'm in my mid-30s as a teacher at school, other teachers will say, "Oh, well, what do you play?" And I don't want to start listing off the last 10 indie games I've played, because I've played a lot of games. I'm like, and I want to say everything, but even then that's not true. And trying to describe people, you and I think are similar, that we want to play everything, and not just one thing, where it'd be very easy to say, I just play Fortnite or Call of Duty,
Yeah. Right.
Which
or
is,
Minecraft, or these people who specialize in, and that's the game they play, and that's fine. That's cool. Go for it. But it's just never how I've been, because I grew up in a time when there were few enough games that I would play all of them.
I wonder if streaming has had an influence on certain people's consumption of just one game versus a lot, because I often hear that variety streamers are not nearly as successful as people that just stream like one game and build a community. I wonder how much impact that's had.
I think it's a big part of it. I absolutely do. I mean, I hosted an event. It's a big long story, but I was hired by a company to host an event with a bunch of really prominent streamers, and they have huge followings, and they play only play Dota, or they only play one specific game. And talking to them about, they have no concept of the history of video games, or how to even play other games. Like, ask them to play Super Mario Brothers, and they're clueless. It's because they're so specialized. But that's just how the world has changed, right? It's not realistic to. It's like asking somebody who's the best baseball player in the world to play ping pong. It's like, well, I don't play ping pong. I play baseball. It's like, well, why would you want me to play ping pong? It's a completely different game.
But you're an athlete. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's some skills that translate, right? But they're not interested in playing ping. They specialized in baseball. They got really good at it, and so they play baseball for many, many hours every single day because they love baseball. They don't just play sports. I mean, there's lots of people who play sports, right? But it's two different mentalities and two different lifestyles.
Right. Yeah, very good point. Yeah. I'm just going through my mind about how many conversations in my life have I had with young people, with adults, with like, oh, what do you read? Oh, what do you play? What do you, oh, you play sports? Like, no, I play basketball. No, I play baseball or soccer. And that's just, it's
Yeah,
funny how once we find what we like, many people will start to specialize in them. Whereas I want to play as many games as possible. I love just trying new things. And
sure.
uh, I'm one of those people that I don't mind if a game is a 6 or not quite perfect, I guess is a better way to put it, because Metacritic can be its own worst enemy. But if a game is not quite perfect but does a lot of things well, I often find a great bit of joy in playing those games that are not quite great in their
Yeah.
category. Yeah.
Well, I think it's another facet of that different mentality, right? Because I'm like you. I'm interested in exploring the systems that the designer developed. Like what is it about this idea that manifests this way, right?
Mm-hmm.
But somebody else wants to get in a game and become the best at it, or really test their own ability level and squeeze every ounce of performance they can out of doing something the best way they can. Get into Call of Duty and be at the top of the leaderboards I just have no motivation to do that. I think it's beyond me, and it's also not really what I sign up for, right? That's not what I'm excited about, is seeing my name at the top of the leaderboard. It's cool if I can ever do it, but
Mm-hmm.
it's more about, oh, look how cool these systems work together, and oh, look at the experience that the designer is trying to create for me, and seeing how that all works together. I play a lot of board games as well, and there are people that you'll invite over to your board game night, and that'll sit around the table and they just want to win. They want to win. I honestly, I play to win because that's the goal of the game, but I couldn't care less if I end up being the winner or not. I'm trying to win. I'm trying to employ a strategy that will let me win. But if I don't win, A, am not surprised, and B, it's not what I came to the evening to experience was winning. I was like, I wanted to see how that board game worked. I wanted to see what the interlocking mechanisms are that the designer was creating here. And so winning is secondary to me than experiencing the game. And I think those are two valid. I don't think my experience or my methodology is superior to the person who wants to come to win. They have perfectly justifiable idea about what makes it fun for them. It's just different approaches.
You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. Jeff, let's transition to our final topic before mail, and that is the PlayStation 5 exclusive, timed exclusive, I should say, Deathloop. It was recently featured in a PlayStation State of Play. A lot of people asking why PlayStation would spotlight Deathloop when it will later be coming to Xbox consoles. I believe the date is September 14th, 2022 is when that exclusivity window ends, and we might see it on other platforms. It's presumed that it would end up on PC and Xbox, given they now own it. Nonetheless, I thought it was a really cool showing, and the willingness for PlayStation to spotlight Deathloop, regardless of its shift in ownership. Uh, I don't have a lot of interest in the game itself, but I think it made a lot of business sense for them to respond and respect the developers of Deathloop and showcase that game that they will have on their console for a year where it can't be anywhere else. And then also in their state of play, they did some indies as well. But I thought it was very appropriate they spotlight Deathloop, and I was really pleased to see them. I don't know if the words are playing nice, right? I don't know. I like when people get along. But did you catch the state of play, or rather,
Sure, yeah.
did you watch it? Do you have any interest in
Yeah.
Deathloop? Where are you standing?
I do. I mean, I think Dishonored was a really cool game. It looks very similar to that. I think Deathloop is a really interesting concept. I'm a little worried about some of it, how they're going to pull off the repetitive nature of the game. I mean, games by their very nature are repetitive, but this seems particularly repetitive. Like, do you have to pull off all of the assassinations in the same run? And so are you repeating a bunch of content that you are failing at on the way to that? I don't know. I will see how it goes. But I mean, I think Arcane's a really great developer, and it looks like an awesome game.
I do too. I do too. I don't know that it's for me. but I was impressed by it. I feel like this is one of those games that I want to watch, I want to hear about, I want to
Yeah.
see, but I don't know that I would be playing a lot of myself. I was also a little bit tripped up, and I'm taking the Microsoft angle here, given the nature of XEP, but it was a little bit interesting to see in articles coming out afterwards, Microsoft's Arcane Studios. That felt a little weird. It just felt
Yeah.
weird. It was just odd, to say the least there.
Yeah, it's a new world we're living in where Microsoft owns Bethesda.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to allow Bethesda to do some interesting things. I'm hopeful that it was a positive acquisition for both parties, and it seems their messaging is that it is. But well, remains to be seen how it all plays out.
I did a poll on Twitter as a result of putting the notes together for this show, and whether or not how people feel about exclusives, right? And I was purposely vague for just to try and gauge interest and see where people took it themselves. But the very simple question: are exclusives good for the industry? Uh, at the moment, 75% of the people are saying yes, 25% saying no. I've always been of the mind that exclusives are a good thing. I have seen elements and parts where I'm not happy with it, but in my mind, exclusives are a good thing for our industry. What's your take on that one?
It's hard to know. I think competition is good in any industry, and certainly exclusives are an extension of competition. And so, in that sense, I think it provides a strong case. You know, these companies are motivated to have very, very cool system sellers that showcase reasons to buy their hardware and invest in their ecosystems. So, in that sense, I think for sure it provides incentive to make really great games and have these companies really invest in great developers and put their money and marketing efforts behind top tier developers. But also, you know, it's hard to know what the world would look like if it was more like a DVD player or a Blu-ray player or something, where, you know, companies are putting out Blu-rays. They don't care what you play them on, right? Any Blu-ray player can play it. I think that is perfectly viable business plan as well. And you could have a whole number of different companies making a whole. I mean, it's PCs, really, right? But
Yeah.
I think if you had a sort of an established spec like the Blu-ray spec, and you had a bunch of companies conforming to that and making their player, I think you'd see lower prices, and I think you'd see a lot of variety and innovation in what is offered there. So it's hard to know what's the best thing. I don't think we're going to see exclusives go away anytime soon. So, you know, I'm looking at the positives of that because I just don't think it's going to change.
Certainly. I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense for sure. Well, Jeff, let's take one listener question and then get you out of here. I know you got a busy schedule. This question came in from Edward Varnell, who is an avid Nintendo fan. And I always give him a hard time because I always feel like his questions are skewed towards Nintendo. And I would venture to say that given he's running into the Xbox expansion pass, he would say it goes the other way. But he asks, Jeff, he says, do you think Microsoft titles would sell better on modern Nintendo consoles, hypothetically? Would you find Nindy titles worth playing on a Microsoft platform that are not on Game Pass and would impress but only by their visuals? I don't know what he means on the visual part, but let's go with the first part. Do you think there are certain Microsoft titles that would sell better if they were on Nintendo platforms?
Sure. I mean, why not, right? I mean, what's the install base of the Switch? A lot.
A lot. It's a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I'm actually surprised this hasn't happened yet. I think Microsoft is getting to the point where they are, as a company, not just as a games company, but as a company overall with Windows and all of the things they do, they have decided they care less about making you use their stuff, you know, their individual products, than it is selling you services. And Game Pass is a service that I think they are all in on. And I really believe that it's not too far off that we will see Game Pass living on Nintendo systems or Sony systems. I think that is something Microsoft is absolutely open to. and they're happy to sell you the Office suite on your iPad, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't care. And I think that's how it's going to be going forward. I think playing Halo on a Switch is absolutely something Microsoft is open to. And I don't think it's that much longer before we see that happen. And I think it does open up a Game Pass subscription to millions of other people that maybe don't have an Xbox hardware. Do you have Switch hardware? And yeah, do I want to play? xCloud is already allowing you to play Halo on handheld devices and stuff like that. So why not? I think it's in Microsoft's best interest. I think it's in Nintendo's best interest. I think it's something that can and probably will happen.
I 100% agree with you. And I think that xCloud is the way we're doing that. We've seen a lot of Switch games in Japan. And now I think starting over here, a lot of the higher fidelity games for the Switch that just can't fit on that cartridge because it's very small in terms of data. They're streaming them, right? I think Resident Evil 7 was the first game in Japan that streamed to a Switch, and that's how you could play it. I think that is how xCloud will, or how Xbox games will function on Switch via xCloud. Already, Edward, if you want to play Minecraft, you can log in via Xbox Live and do different types of crossplay there with Minecraft Dungeons, I believe. There are systems put in place that to me are building towards the future. And with maybe what you were kind of getting at with the visuals, that new OLED model of the Switch will be a brilliant and beautiful showcase for games like Sea of Thieves or Halo Infinite, if indeed xCloud does come to a Switch. And I don't think that's far away. I really don't. Microsoft is adamant that they are going to get to 3 billion screens. They used to say 2, and now they're internally saying 3. So that is an absurd amount of people, and you only do that by being accessible in as many places as possible. And if they're willing to shoulder the burden of processing on their own servers, why not do the streaming, and why not let the Switch do just that? And I think that's the promise of xCloud. That's the promise of what Stadia was trying to do. Luna is out there for Amazon. Why would they not have that built in? The only thing I can see happening would be Nintendo or Apple trying to get in the way and wanting certain amounts of the profits. And who's to say they do or don't deserve that? I mean, you can look at the court system right now, Jeff. I don't know if you've followed the Epic and Apple and Microsoft debates there of who gets what percentage of a cut anywhere. But it can be hectic.
For sure. Yeah.
So
yeah, I agree.
Well, that is going to be it. Thank you to those of you who wrote in for your questions this week. I don't want to take too much of Jeff's time. Jeff Cannata, thank you for joining me. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you to plug your many projects and make sure that the Dungeon Run gets a healthy dose of showcase there. Where can people find you, and where should they be looking for your content?
Well, the easiest way is to follow me on Twitter. I'm at Jeff Cannata, which is spelled with 2 N's and 1 T. I do this video game podcast we've mentioned called DLC. You can find that at 5by5.tv/DLC. I do a movie and television review show called the /Filmcast. You can find that at /filmcast.com. I do a comedy science show called We Have Concerns. You can find that at wehaveconcerns.com. And the Dungeon Run, which is my live play Dungeons and Dragons show. Super proud of that show. It streams live Wednesday nights at 6 p.m. Pacific time at twitch.tv/The Dungeon Run, but it's also available on YouTube and as an audio podcast.
For the past few weeks, guys, I've been checking out the latest headset from SteelSeries, the Arctis Prime. Now, they did send me a review unit, and that is the one I've been using and am currently using right now as I record this particular show. The Arctis Prime is a budget comparison model to, say, their Arctis 7 or Arctis 9X, which would retail at substantially more, around $250, $300. The Arctis Prime is a $100 headset that you might consider comparable to the Xbox One headset that they recently released. It is visually very similar to like the Arctis 9 or Arctis 7s. It's got that ski strap that's really comfortable to have on top of the headset, and sound wise it sounds really good, especially for a $100 unit, but it is a budget unit compared to some of the more elite versions that they've got out there. At $100, you've got a very different type of setup. You're not necessarily using Bluetooth. You're not necessarily doing this wirelessly. In fact, I'm using an audio plugin when I play on my Xbox, using that 3.5 millimeter jack on the controller to plug it in. And sound wise, it sounds really good. I was very pleased with the sound quality. I was initially quite concerned that it would not sound comparable to my Arctis 7s that I'm using right now, which is my favorite gaming headset, by the way. I was worried that the Primes would be just lackluster by comparison. And I was pleasantly surprised that sound wise, it sounds really, really good. The Primes do a very good job at mimicking the higher quality elements of the 7s or 9Xs. That said, it is noticeably different in certain cases, certain more high intensity games. I've been playing a lot of Doom Eternal's DLC lately, and I can tell a noticeable difference in the, I guess you would say, the depth of the sound, as it were. And there are a few little like oddities that don't quite line up well. There's no chat mix on the side that I was able to use in order to adjust like just how loud like I would be in game chat versus not, whereas you get that on some of the higher model units. There is a really good set of noise isolation, so it locks out other sounds from around you. You're a little bit better there. The cups around each side of the headset are quite comfortable, I would say. Not nearly as comfortable as the Arctis 7s. They've got this kind of plasticky feel to it that can make it a little bit odd. I saw a few different other reviews around the internet as I checked out what other people thought, and the word creaky showed up a few times, and that's oddly appropriate. It is a little bit of a creaky unit. It feels like maybe it's made with a few cheaper components than you would get with your $300 headset, which of course makes perfect sense. But it does a really good job at being a very simple design with uh, on a budget, I guess you would say, right? Like if you're in the market for a good solid headset that's not a cheap throwaway one, you know how like you might walk into like a GameStop or a Walmart and get like a really cool looking green or purple one, but it's only like $40 or whatnot. This is not that. This is a high quality, very capable headset at around $100, and it punches above its weight. I was quite pleased with a lot of different elements of these this particular headset. It's got hi-fi speaker drivers, which is very comfortable and standard in the Arctis family. You have the ear cups that are comfortable. Again, very even weight distribution throughout, but it's a budget unit. It is not cheap though. I don't want to suggest that when I say it's a budget unit that it's cheaply made. It's not. It's really comfortable. It's really nice. If I spent $100 on this, I would have been thrilled with the quality that I'm getting. I would have been very pleased with what I've got here. Overall, out of this particular headset, I can say that I'm spoiled because I've been investing in the higher quality Arctis lines. But yet again, I feel like the Arctis series of headsets is just top notch. There are no issues in terms of like audio flickering that sometimes Xbox users would get on the old 9Xs. I never get that with the 7s. But on the old 9X, there would be like little pops here and there on occasion. Never happened with the 7s. Definitely not happening with the Arctis Pros, and that's probably because it's plugging straight into your controller. But overall, pretty pleased with it. Pretty pleased with it. I would say that you should be snagging an Arctis Prime headset if you're in the market for a $100 to $150 headset. You'll be quite pleased with the Arctis Primes. Really solid set of headphones here. If you want to hold off for more expensive ones, I'll always suggest Arctis 7s. I really like those a lot. And the Xbox $100 headset that this is competing with, I think we've got a really good competitor with the Arctis Prime. So take that as you will. Understand that SteelSeries did indeed send me a unit. That is the one that I have been using and I'm using right now. And overall, pretty pleased with it. All right, guys, that's it for me. Thank you for sticking around through this episode of XEP. Have a wonderful rest of your week. Take care.